What if I were to suggest that you play a key role in the awakening world? And that you are watching this because you have heard the call. We can start right now by opening our hearts and minds. Welcome to the awakening world.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Awakening World, our Wednesday night edition. Wednesday nights are always a wonderful night because it's Trish Wright co-host night, which always makes me very happy. So Trish and I are here and we are welcoming you. I'm going to put the spotlight on her. I love when I embarrass her a little bit. Here she is. And Trish and I are going to be sharing with three amazing teachers and our beloved Omar Shar, one of our favorite topics, how to cultivate more emotional and sexual intimacy. And we want to hear from you. We're going to make this is going to be one of those shows where we really want to take questions and share and make this valuable for all of you. So, and we've got Steve Rowland, the founder and creator of RelationFlix, is with us. And a brand new, I should be putting him on while I talk about this, and a brand new guest who I'm looking forward to getting to know, Sabrina Sundari. And Hazel Grace is with us, longtime friend and a brilliant coach. And to get us off to the most wonderful start, as he always does, our beloved friend Omar Shar, our co-pilot and house musical artist. Welcome, Omar Shar.
Namaste, everybody, and what a wonderful topic, really. It's going to thaw some ice that I think I've had in my psyche for a while, and it's really important, this topic, and so I'm excited for what's ahead. And so here's a little ditty for us to all warm ourselves up with. Let's say, if we're not already warm.
Wow, look at that background.
I know, right? So that's good. We're good.
Hearts are open, hands together, loving each other, sisters and brothers. And what we are is light and foam, and light and foam will lift us all. So don't give up on walking tall. The time is now, so heed the call and wake up to the light of this new day. frequency, higher vibration, minds are open, love is flowing, lifting each other as we are growing. 'Cause what we are is light in form, and light and form will lift us all. So don't give up on walking tall. The time is now, so heed the call, and wake up to the light of this new day. Come on. We are the heart of our world, light in our world. We are the joy in our world, the love in our world. We are gathered in this nation, raising frequency, raising vibration. Hearts are open, hands together, loving each other, sisters and brothers. Yeah. We are the heart of our world, the light in our world. We are the joy in our world, the love in our world.
A big thank you to Eleanor Joy doing the dancing. And there is Ian. Ian, now where were you, Ian? We missed you. We missed you, I gotta say. But thank you, Eleanor Joy, for carrying the dancing load today. And of course, thank you, beautiful, beloved brother Omashar. That is such a great song. And thank you for getting us off to a wonderful start. And a reminder to everybody that we can get all things Omashar by going to omashar.com. And that's where you can learn all about him. And always best to buy his music on Bandcamp, and he's got wonderful albums available. So let us support our beloved brother Omashar. And I am going to put this brother here for a moment. What does sexual and emotional intimacy bring up for you? What-
Well, interesting you asked that, because in our pre-meeting, we always, everybody watching, we always have a little pre-meeting just to kind of get to know each other and to talk about a few aspects. And something that came up, and I think it might have been Sabrina was talking about it, okay, I'm kind of spacing out here, and I thought that's because I think it's hitting my buttons. I've been out of a relationship for almost a decade, and I decided to just enfold myself into myself and find out where I'm hurting. And now I'm finding out that I wouldn't mind a relationship again. However, I'm quite freaked out about getting into the sexual aspect of it, because in my past relationships, I had a sell-by date of about 18 months. And the 18 months wasn't that I didn't love the person I was with. That was when the shift hit the fan. And so I was out of there. Basically, I think that's enough for now. I'm excited to find out where I'm blocking myself from experiencing the fullness of my humanness. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, what I appreciate is Omashar just shared vulnerably. And that's an invitation for all of us. Here on The Awakening World, we talk about all the different issues that affect us human beings. We are spiritual beings, but we're having a human experience. And certainly emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy, it brings up some of those challenging aspects of human existence. And so tonight, you're going to meet some amazingly loving, compassionate people who are going to share with you ways that we can kind of resolve some of those issues, some of those challenges. And so I want to invite all of you who are watching on Facebook to 150, 200 channels of Facebook groups and pages, come join us. Come on into the Zoom room. Come join the Global Peace Tribe. And it's really easy to do that. Just go to globalpeacetribe.com. globalpeacetribe.com. You can scroll around and learn all about what we're doing, all of our different shows, get your free copy of this great book by Deborah Giusti. I just had dinner with Deborah here last night. And then click register for the new season. And when you click register for the new season, it's going to take you for a registration page. And for any of you who don't know, we do 3 or 4 shows every week. So for example, last week we did a wonderful show all about celebrating Pride Month. It was an amazing show. We had a woman who had actually been at the Stonewall restaurant when that infamous riot or police raid that led to the riots took place. She was in prison for 4 years for a same-sex marriage. She's now in her 70s, and hearing her story we were in tears. Anyway, that was last week's show. Then on Saturday night, we all worked on how to manifest. It's a new season, summer for many of us, winter for some, how to manifest at the highest levels. And then Omashar and I led a very dynamic Global Peace Tribe community conversation. So when you register, you're going to get the Zoom room links to all of our shows for the next 3 months. And we do always 3 shows, sometimes 4. Join us. And come on in, like right now, because when you join, you'll right away get the links. And we want to hear your questions. What comes up for you? And again, thank you, Omashar, for being so vulnerable. And speaking of vulnerable, she is always so open-hearted and vulnerable and wonderful. My co-host and one of my favorite people on the planet, Trish.
Thanks.
What comes up for you with tonight's topic?
Intimacy. You know how much I love intimacy.
I do. Into me, see.
You probably heard me say this again a zillion times before. And as some of you do know, that for me, intimacy is vulnerability, honesty. Vulnerability plus trust is intimacy. And add a little honesty in there, or a whole lot. And then it gives you the opportunity to really open yourself. And I've got a couple personal shares tonight around how to stay intimate with oneself and be honest with oneself, as well as being honest with your partner, and how to really like reconcile the sensitive, juicy parts. So I'm excited. And I'm also just really excited about our guest tonight. I adore Stephen, and I love Hazel Grace as well. I totally got to hang out with her totally got to hang out with them at Soul Play this year, and that was just a juicy bit.
Beautiful. All right, well, I guess we will go into Stephen. And Stephen is somebody that Trish and I love and adore. He's one of our absolute favorite human beings. He's also the co-creator and founder of Relationflix, which is the Netflix for relationships. And we'll be talking about it. We'll be looking at it. He has put together an incredible platform where you can get just about any question answered about relationship. So what's alive for you on tonight's topic, Stephen?
Yeah, it's a pretty special evening because I have my beloved Sabrina on the call here with me, and just such a joy and treat that we're in similar fields and we get to share professional experiences like this together. And I'm gonna kind of pull back the curtains and share a little bit of a peek in some of the early processes of our relationship. And I find myself continuously in awe of Sabrina for just her yes, her willingness to open and lean in and really be in the processes that make a healthy relationship work. And it reminds me that when there's challenge or conflict, the tendency or proclivity can be towards blame and shame and projection or make wrong towards the other person, right? Like there can be like this kind of accusatory or prosecutorial, you did that, or you're being this way, or I can't believe you would do this to me. And it's like our dialogue tends to be about what the other person's doing. And for me, like the intimacy part is like less about pointing the finger outward and pointing the finger inward, and like really dropping into what's real, true, and alive at the level of self. And then courageously and vulnerably, basically like dismantling the paradigm of making it about the other person and kind of going into self and being like, hey, this one piece, like I feel like a little bit angry or frustrated, or it's like we're making it about the self and revealing vulnerably what's here, rather than being in that prosecutorial space. And it's something that I'm finding Sabrina just does so well. And like I feel like that opens me, it's like often our relationship, to have a breakthrough in the middle of a challenge, we almost have to go against the grain and give the thing that we least want to give. And that's like an open-hearted, vulnerable reveal. And to me, that's where emotional intimacy starts. Like you said it so well, Trish, about intimacy and vulnerability. And yeah, it reminds me of a Scott Thomas quote that I love, and that's, lovemaking isn't necessarily sexual intercourse. Lovemaking is taking challenge or conflict and turning it into more love. And it's through that vulnerable softening that we do that. And I say this over and over and over again. It's emotional intimacy and the process of a closed heart opening is for sure my biggest aphrodisiac. So that's what I have to say on that for now. You're muted, Scott.
Would you like to introduce Sabrina?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. It is a pleasure for me to introduce my beloved relationship coach and rapid resolution therapist partner, Sabrina Sundari.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so what Stephen was saying actually brought up a lot for me, because being in the practice of relationship has shown me my past patterns where, for example, when there's been a conflict between us, it's been very easy for me to just sit in the numbness and the closedness and kind of stare and let it be. And that's been my past pattern of just allowing the tension to exist and then kind of forgetting about it and moving on with making breakfast. And then it all builds as resentment. And then the relationship eventually collapses. And now I'm choosing differently. And I'm choosing to notice when I go numb and cold and do the very difficult work of going inwards and saying, I'm going to, even though I really, really don't want to, I'm going to open my heart in this moment. And I try to send my attention down to my heart. And I imagine it like a flower that's closed, and I imagine it opening up. And then I look at him and then I talk and I say, this is how I feel. Even if it's that I feel numb, and even if it's that I feel angry or closed. And that opening and that vulnerability is really what's been the shift for me in cultivating love and intimacy in this relationship. Someone earlier brought up about the 2-year kind of, or the 18-month expiry on relationships. And that makes a lot of sense, because 2 years is actually when most relationships end, because all the chemicals that brought us into relationship and to connection start to fade. Dopamine, serotonin, all of them start fading. And that's why we need to do the work of developing beyond the sparks and the butterflies into the vulnerability of actual connection, so that after the 2 years, it's not just physical. It's not just about how you make me jazzed up inside. It's beyond that. It's the depth. It's somebody that can hold your crying inner child, for example. And that goes way beyond the chemicals. And I also loved what was said about loving yourself, because I was single for 5 years before I entered relationships. I was celibate, and I spent that 5 years cultivating my inner relationship so that I could do the work within relationship of being like, oh yeah, I feel numb. How do I actually feel? What am I willing to go into further? So thanks everyone for sharing. I love the conversation. I look forward to more.
Okay, Scott.
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
What all you don't know is we have conversations in background, so I'm just letting you know. I'm really honored to introduce Hazel Grace. Also because I got to hang out with them at Soul Play, like I said, and I'm just like super duper excited. So I'm going to read a little bit of your bio. Hazel Grace Yates. In their 13 years as a sex and relationship coach, Hazel Grace discovered that many couples who wanted better sex were in fact blocked by unresolved emotional hurts. Anybody else resonate with that? Totally. The quality of their communication was the real roadblock, and the skills that helped couples resolve and heal these communication gaps transformed their capacity for intimacy in and out of the bedroom. There's nothing sexier than someone who can communicate effectively, right? And like kindly, and who's like, here's my heart. I want to be good to yours. Their innovative, fun, and educational style of sex and intimacy coaching is born out of their deep commitment to creating a more compassionate, loving, and safe world. I have personal experience with that. As a revolutionary educator, they bring a unique blend of professional know-how, playful curiosity, and authentic communication and personal vulnerability to their practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Trish. I feel so delighted and warmed by that introduction. Yeah. So what we've mentioned it several times tonight. And the thing that I'm really, really passionate about and curious about these days is being able to repair, like I said in my bio. And this is a very personal story for me, as someone who was raised with violence and yelling, and there was no conflict resolution going on in my household. And so then I went on into my dating relational life, and I dated people that were abusive and toxic. And so I spent a couple of decades in really either single or really unhealthy relationships. And I was just bound and determined. I was bound and determined. I knew that there could be a better way. And so I have so much to celebrate with you tonight. My dad and I have actually healed our relationship, and he's one of my closest friends, and I'm so proud of who we are and who he is. And then I also am reporting that I am in a long-term, healthy, secure, expansive, supportive, amazing, epic relationship. And so I have basically tracked the last 13 years. What have I learned about communications and relationships and professionally with people? And so I'm really excited about a process that I've recently developed. It's called the repair process, which is very convenient because repair, you can remember that word. So yeah, I just get lit up by conflict. And you mentioned, Trish, I actually got turned on last night helping a couple of my friends heal from a thing, and they revealed, and they had this transformation. I was like, this is hot. I'm so into this.
So into this too. Repair is incredibly sexy, and I'll share a story about that later. But yes, repair.
Yeah.
I mean, can I ask you all a question? How much of our intimacy and sex coaching and relationship coaching, this is for you, Scott, too, is really about teaching people not to be jerks to each other? How to, it's all conflict resolution. I mean, how much? Percentage wise? Just ask.
Well, I'll address that actually, because what I was thinking that I wanted to talk about is that this perfect segue. Obviously, being a jerk is a judgment. The truth is, we behave like a jerk when our reptile brain takes over. And it's really important for us to understand the biology of it all, to understand that when all human beings have a program that when we are faced with danger, when the possibility of attack exists, we've got a reptile brain that protects us. And possibility of attack, we defend ourselves through fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we all have that mechanism. And it was a good thing for our ancestors because they were in constant physical danger. But we're not. We're blessed. We're living in an amazing time. And I do hear, of course, Hazel Grace's, what she went through. So I'm not denying that some of us have gone through being in very real, frightening and physically threatening situations. But most of the time in our relationships now, we are not physically threatened, but we still have that mechanism. And certainly someone who has had to go through physical threatening situations has perhaps an increased hypervigilance. And so there is a reptile brain reactivity that exists within all of us that we have to learn how to honor and to manage, so we aren't jerks, which is what happens when we're in reptile brain, but instead we recognize, I'm perceiving danger. Am I really in danger? Or is that just my reaction? Can I come back to my frontal lobe? Can I come back to the center and be present? And I would love to hear what Steve Rowland has to say about that, because he's got his hand up and he's brilliant.
Yeah. I'm just gonna add another layer to what you just so beautifully expressed there, Scott. And it brings me into the neurobiology of what happens when we experience a traumatic life event, something that's particularly relational, whether it's something with our parents growing up or an intimate partner, is that there's a part of our brain that's sole purpose is to keep us safe. It's the center of the brain, the midbrain, called the superior colliculus, and this part of our brain is running all the time, even when we're sleeping. It's that reason why when we hear a noise, that even if it's quiet, there's a part of our brain that's still scanning an environment for a threat. And when we've experienced some type of relational trauma, again with a parent or a family member, that part of our brain can actually grow to 3 to 4 times the size that it normally is with a healthy developed, an uninjured brain. And so what that translates to is that part of our brain actually starts to work in overdrive. And to kind of piggyback on something that you said there, Scott, is like, there doesn't actually necessarily need to be a threat present, just the possibility of a threat. And the part of our brain that's responsible for being on the lookout for that possibility of the threat amplifies. And so it's worthwhile just to have awareness of that when we've experienced some type of relational trauma, that there's a part of us that's in service to keeping us safe. That part of us that's in service to keeping us safe gets even more amplified. And so just a little bit of extra self-compassion when maybe we are a jerk, and compassion for others when they're in a more reactive state too, and just acknowledging that, hey, this is the part of their brain that's responsible for keeping myself or them safe. And it's like, how do we reestablish safety? And like having that as the North Star is step one.
Hazel Grace, would you like to move forward with this conversation on how we reestablish safety?
Yeah, sure. I also want to say, along with the reptile brain and the getting triggered and activated, I also want to say that our communication skills that we got were usually either what we learned from our caregivers, our parents, or the culture growing up, or if we were like saying, I reject the way that they communicate, I'm going to pendulate and go the opposite direction. I'm going to do the opposite of that. So while we have compassion for our reptilian part of our brain, also having compassion that most of us weren't taught really empowering skills. And when I think of safety, the very, very, very first thing that comes to my mind is, am I being heard? Is the other person hearing me? And the simplest tool that I feel like I can give anyone, and it's how I start almost all of my sessions with my client, is the ability to feedback or paraphrase or tell the other person what you heard them say. When someone can do that, and especially like if I'm, newly meeting a friend or newly on a date, and they really like communicate back what I'm saying, I can just feel my whole nervous system relax, and my prefrontal cortex come online and leaning in. So to me, safety is really about feeling heard.
Mm, absolutely. That is so powerful. Absolutely. Sabrina, what would you like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, it struck me that question about perceiving people as jerks or not treating people as jerks. And as somebody who's come from difficult relationships and who helps women who've had similar backgrounds, I find a lot of the narrative they come with from that is like, men are jerks, men are evil, you can't trust men. So they've kind of got this program of people are going to be jerks because people have been jerks in the past. So we enter a relationship with somebody, we want to kind of try to shift that and have positive regard. That's my mantra, with like hold people with a positive state of regard. So that means that giving them the benefit of the doubt. If I am approaching you already thinking you're going to be a jerk because I've seen other people be jerks, the relationship's already doomed. It's already over. I've already signed the death note of it. So that's what I'd like to really emphasize is people might be jerks, but we need to give them the benefit of the doubt that they actually might not be.
Wow. Thank you. Almost sure. I'm putting the spotlight on you just because you just said something in the chat box.
It is. I don't think I've ever been heard. Well, as Sabrina came on, I was in my mind was going. A question came up, which was, what happens if you know these NVC or whatever you'd like to term them tools, and the person you're with has closed ears to that? Then really, there's no way further forward. And but I know that I don't think I've ever faced anybody. I got brought up in England, which is my excuse for everything. However, we don't do I don't do conflict at all very well. I just go blank, I go numb, and that's it. And my front thingamajig shuts down, and my back thingamajig goes, "Yeah, I'm in charge now. Let's run." And so what I'm getting through Steve and Hazel Grace and Sabrina and Trish and you, Scott, is just kind of this. There's a veil there that needs to be rent somehow within myself. And it brought up the comment that I just put in the chat, which is, I don't think anybody has ever heard me. And therefore, extrapolating that, I guess I never have told anybody how I feel. So there we are.
Thank you.
Truly feel that is. I mean, I can, I'm the diplomat. I can spin. I can spin if okay, I'll carry on a little bit. If a conflict comes towards me and I feel it, all my hairs come up, and my mind will find a way of trying to spin myself out of it and change the subject. Kind of, I got pretty good at it actually, but at my own detriment. So, okay, there we go.
Thank you, Omashar. Thank you. And Stephen wrote something, but I'll let him say it to you.
Brother.
Hey, Omashar. I really heard you and felt you in your expression there.
Yeah. Even taking the first steps is a trip, and I'm doing it publicly because we have some of the world's greatest teachers right here who've walked the path themselves, and I'm not going to let this opportunity go to rent my veils. So yeah, thanks, Trish. Yes.
You brought up a good thing. What do you do when you're with someone who doesn't know NVC? Well, I am also in a new relationship with someone who had never even heard of NVC. She's from Germany. It's all very new to her. And the German form of communication is quite different, especially so a lot of patience, right? And then we get to just lead by example, and I've got an impatient. I want to own that I've got an impatient this week, but then we just keep coming back. And one thing that really helps is one of the practices that we teach in Love Coach Academy is when we notice that first agitation, when we notice we're missing connection, 4 magic words: yellow light, let's connect. Coming back into connection and making the commitment to notice, when do I feel connected and when am I losing connection? And if we just start with that place, because it feels so good when we're connected, And it feels funky when we lose connection. And if we go slow enough, we can notice when we're feeling connected to anybody. This doesn't have to be with a lover, it could be with a platonic friend. I know when Trish and I feel connected, and I know when we're losing connection. And so just paying attention to that and then gently asking, hey, yellow light, meaning kind of let's slow down, let's connect. Let's connect. And just that practice has really helped my new partner and I. When things began to speed up and we're beginning to, start out talking each other. And one of us calls it, it brings us back into a centered place. Trish.
I love this. Some of us are in new relationships and we got some NRE going on. One of the things that I wanted to share is a breakdown that recently happened, and it was really, really sweet. So I'm also dating someone new. And this person is not has literally never heard of any of half the things that I know all about. And they grew up in Omaha, and it's just a very interesting, experience. So I had a couple of really challenging days in a row. I don't know if anybody else has this experience where things stack on itself, but I have a couple of those. And it'll smooth sail and then just a bunch of challenges that, again, we can dissect that if we want a little later. So I'm sitting here and I'm kind of sharing about how we run an app called Marco Polo. This is how we communicate long distance. I don't know if anybody else uses it, but it's fantastic. And we can see each other and we can communicate. And so he's moving around and being like, oh, hey, just do this and this and this. And I'm having one of my really, really sick days where I can barely actually get out of bed. I've had a couple of breakdowns with one of my best friends. I had my Instagram account deactivated because someone keeps reporting me for community standards. And that's some of the things that I've worked my whole, for the last year. So all of these things about my security are breaking down. And he doesn't quite get it because I'm not actually sharing. So guess who feels disconnected? Can anyone guess who's feeling disconnected? Well, I'm the one feeling disconnected. And do you know what I did? You're disconnected. And then I was like, oh, no. Second video. No. Actually, that's not true. I'm disconnected. Who's feeling the feelings? I'm feeling the feelings. I'm disconnected. And I'm feeling nervous to share the breakdowns in my life because in the past, my partners have ran away when I needed them most in these moments. And I'm afraid that the bigness of my sensitivity is going to cause you to run away. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, I tried to fix it. I just wanted to run into the burning building and save you because I didn't want you to burn. And I was like, I get it, Mr. Firefighter Man. But what I really need is you just to get on the floor with me and being like, hey, yo, this sucks. It's going to be okay. And it was a pretty, at first it was a pretty big shift. And I had to also remember that he was triggered too. When he realized that he couldn't save me, he got real triggered. And I was like, uh-oh. And instead of choosing the victim, I was like, oh, maybe I could try empathizing with him. One of the things that that I heard many years ago from Derek Hart. Do you all know Derek Hart?
Derek's been on the show.
Yeah, he has. And he did this. I sent him someone that I didn't have the wherewithal to actually hold. And this woman was very, very upset that her partner had cheated on her. And she wanted a judge is what she wanted. She didn't want a coach. She wanted a judge. And one of the things that he was like, hey, she came back and she was like, he wanted me to empathize with my ex-husband. And I was like, wow, what an interesting strategy. And I sat back and I thought about it for so long. And it occurred to me that person really needed to be seen and heard. And he had not been heard or seen for many years, which, and I was like, so I keep thinking about that. And that's how I approached the situation is that I dropped my story, reached out to him and was like, what do you need? And he was like, oh my God. Yeah, I feel really seen. I was really afraid of losing you. And I was afraid that you were really having a hard time. And so we ended up creating a new strategy for when things break down. And he asked me to be more descriptive of my feelings. I was like, more? Anyway, that was, and we've had a couple of like little shifts since, little like friction since then. And it's been so sweet because he hears it and he gets real present and I get real present. And it's just been the most amazingly beautiful deepening of intimacy. And it's made our sexual intimacy even better. Safety. Who knew, Scott?
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. And it is interesting that you and I were both single for almost a long time. And that we're both in new relationships right now. Isn't that interesting? And our beloved Steve Rowland. I mean, it wasn't long ago, all three of us were in a hotel room together and we were all moaning about being single. So here we are. Life is interesting. Thank you, Sabrina, for loving up our friend, because we love Steve Rowland very much. All right, so here's a question that came in. This came in actually on Facebook. How do I learn to love myself when my partner doesn't treat me kindly? That is exact words. How do I learn to love myself when my partner isn't treating me kindly? Anybody want to tackle that? Stephen.
That's such a juicy, rich question. And I want to preface this by saying this actually might not be what this person wants to hear, but I actually think it's what it's needed. In a situation like that where our partner isn't treating us kindly, to me in that moment, self-love is about advocating for ourselves for being treated kindly. And there's like a quality of like really like I've got my own back, like, and I'm going to give something a voice that I feel like needs to be voiced right now because I feel like I'm being treated unkindly or unfairly. And so sometimes self-love is like has like a softening kind of a texture where we kind of go inward and hold an aching inner child. And sure, that might be appropriate for a moment. But also sometimes self-love is having our warrior kind of step up and go to bat for us. And self-love could look like when our partner is treating us unkindly, just like slowing things down and saying like, something like, I would really love it if you could speak more kindly to me right now. Just make a request. And like, to me, that's a highly self-loving thing to do. Self-advocacy.
Beautiful response. Thank you. Anybody else want to add? Although that was a beautiful response. Hazel Grace.
Yeah, when I hear that, the self-love is boundaries and being able to say, I actually need space or I need support. So there's two things that come to mind. One is boundaries and being able to take space if that's what's needed. And then the other one is like, okay, if the person I'm with is not feeling great, how can I turn either to myself or to my community or to my resources of what would feel supportive to me? I know that for me, when I was in unhealthy relationships for a lot of times I would just hide what was going on because I was embarrassed or felt ashamed. Or also I thought this was just normal. I had normalized it. I'm like, yeah, this is just what a relationship is. You're just like always in upset or like someone's always fighting or something like that. So when I kind of surrounded myself and outed my own self or started talking to other people, getting support, going to a therapist, I then realized that behavior was like no longer acceptable to me. And so that's when I'm acknowledging the boundaries of like, when I'm being treated in this way, I'm going to choose to remove myself as an expression of care for myself and self-love and put my attention towards the places that I know are resourcing and supportive for me.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you. There's a question here. I guess I should go to myself. There's a question here, and I'll bring up everybody, from Roger. And Roger's one of our regulars. And George, I'm going to also get to what you wrote, which is very beautiful. But Roger asks, is it true that men are programmed to rescue? And I'm going to expand upon that. is it true that men and or women are programmed in any specific way? Is there any programming, or what is the programming that the masculine has, the feminine has? Or is that just kind of a cultural myth? Sabrina.
I can only speak to my own experience and to the larger drama triangle where there's the victim, the persecutor. Can somebody remind me of the third one?
Rescuer.
Thank you. Yeah. So we all play this role in the drama triangle. And I have seen myself as the rescuer many times, especially when I was younger. And that was a really negative relationship pattern I was in. I loved men who were broken so that I could fix them. And then I felt like I had a role and I was important. And then eventually my last relationship prior to my celibacy, I was the one who was rescued. So I have experience being all the people in the triangle. And when I was in my victim, I needed the rescuer. So I think men who are seeing themselves as often as the rescuer need to maybe think about, are they attracted to women or if women are the people they are in relationship with usually, who are in victim? That would be an interesting question, Rhonda, for me to ask you further.
Yeah. Anybody else want to, and again, what she was referencing is there's a famous thing, which is called the perpetrator, rescuer, victim triangle. And it's a pretty common dynamic that we fall into, where the victim feels victimized by somebody. The rescuer comes running in, here I come to save the day. And in that dynamic, somebody is a perpetrator. And the truth is, all of us can fall into those traps. It's something that, probably all of us as relationship coaches have, processed with our clients or taught in our courses, taught in our classes. So thank you for, kind of bringing that up. Anybody else want to talk about that? Breaking out of victim mentality or out of rescuer modality?
Yeah. I'll just add another layer and dimension to that. And your reframe on the question, Scott, was about conditioning. Are people conditioned? And to me, it's just such an easy, resounding yes. If we look at, say, for like the last 10 years of what's shown up in Hollywood, prior to 10 years ago, everything was about having someone who's in some type of a victim stance or posture that needs rescuing. And that was highly romanticized to a degree where, kind of like in the peak moments of the film, the person who was needing of being rescued was rescued by their hero. And that heroism was idealized. And, like if you drop into a peak moment of a movie where someone is saved or rescued and the hero shows up and saves the day, and like there's this peak moment where there's this like really emotional, evocative music, and everything's in service to grandizing that moment. And so a lot of us develop this idea that this is what relationships should look like. We want that kind of like big, huge, emotionally evocative and eruptive symphony kind of going on for us while we're in relationship. And yeah, it brings me back to the truth that like the healthiest relationships, like sure, there's going to be peak experiences and there's going to be low dips where things are difficult, but like the bigger picture is there's kind of like this like long running stream of like almost like a lukewarm hug, rather than this kind of like eruptive, highly symphonic, euphoric moment of peak bliss that we idealize. It's like, so to me, it's like the lukewarm bath versus the hot tub that scorches us.
Beautiful. Well, I am going to actually bring up something from when I was teaching with Emily Oram, and Emily was on our show last week, so a lot of people in the Zoom room remember her. And so let's just talk about this triangle for a moment. So here is a little, and hopefully all of you at home can see this. This is the codependence triangle, and it starts with the victim mentality, and all of us have played victim at some time about something. And kind of victim mentality is poor me, I'm helpless, I'm hopeless. And then the caretaker or the rescuer comes rushing in to save the day. And often the third part of it, the perpetrator, is actually any of us. When we're holding the idea that somebody is bad or stupid or wrong. And all of us have at some point, probably recently, maybe today, said something to someone that may have been interpreted as accusing them of being stupid or being bad or being wrong. And it can be as simple as, no, that's not the right direction. Or why are you doing that? Or that's crazy. You know, we quickly will blurt these things out, which in that moment, we are the perpetrator and we are casting on the other one some sort of a judgment, right? So that's the traditional triangle. And I want to acknowledge Emily and I worked on this together. So this is the, oh, whoops, wrong one. So now let's go to the alternative. And we call this the interdependence triangle. Everybody able to see the victor? We go from victim to victor by saying, I am actually not helpless. I am empowered. I'm finding my empowerment. And the caregiver doesn't rush right into rescue, but starts with, I love and honor myself fully. And that's been a big lesson for me because I'm a rescuer. I was born on Christmas Day. I grew up with the Messiah complex. So I always have been trying to rescue. So learning to love myself first and not jump into rescue. And then for perpetrator, instead of bad, stupid, wrong, to become compassion in action. So somebody does something and my first reaction might be, it's crazy, why are you doing that? To notice my judgment, notice that, come back to center. Why is she doing that? She's scared. She wants to be heard. He wants to be understood. He wants respect. And that's the genius of Marshall Rosenberg, is everything we do, even if it's a crazy strategy, we're trying to get some need met. So an opportunity to share all of that. Let's talk about empathy. I'm going to bring all of our people up for a moment, because one of our regulars whom we love is George Noble. And I'm going to put George on the screen for a moment too, but I'm going to read what George wrote. So hi, George. George wrote, only since the pandemic, I've discovered that hearing is a feeling. Yes, it's an emotional experience. And I've had significant hearing challenges all my life due to pre-verbal rage at abandonment, which is what I learned from my intuitive energy doctor. I can recall being in an embrace with a dear beloved and her cooing something softly into my ear, but I wasn't able to understand her, so I had to disengage from the embrace, move to arm's length in order to see, so I could lip read what she had said. And since this was a newer love, she did not repeat, and that bout of intimate exchange died then and there. Very sad. Now she's with someone else. That's one example from my hearing challenged experience. And I wonder whether any of you normal hearing folk can relate to who knew hearing was feeling. Now I can speak fully empowered, and I'm perceived as coming on to men and women alike than too much, too close. It scares people. I do notice that I can get telepathic with some and not need to speak. So I just really want to thank you, George, and open it up to our friends, our beloveds here, to share any empathy or understanding. Trish, as my co-host, would you lead?
Oh yeah. I just wanted to give everyone else an opportunity to jump in. I'm going to speak a little bit to the conditioning, but George, I know that this is a particularly challenging piece. It's like we want to connect, right? And I hear you wanting to connect, and I hear you wanting to stay there, be heard, and also to hear and feel. And that disruption can be can cause a lot of disruption inside, right? In our home. You want to unmute? A second. Hi.
I wasn't paying real close attention to this. Could you ask again?
Yeah.
What
Well, I didn't ask questions.
you didn't
You to unmute so that we could have a conversation. I wasn't just talking at you.
typing another note to Hazel Grace about relating to my own relationship with my father to her story. And, so you said something to me. I saw unmute come up and thought you were trying to engage me. Maybe not.
Well, I am engaging you just so that we're here together. And you could. Yeah, thank you. I'm like, oh, we're in the room right together.
You're welcome. Yeah.
And I know that it's vulnerable to share so honestly, right? When we have our sensitive bits, and even if our sensitive bits and we're like here, and someone doesn't see it or hear it, or if someone doesn't see the bid for connection when we reach out to touch their sensitive bits, it can be really dysregulating and cause a lot of like, oh my gosh, am I safe? Is that how? Can you tell me a little bit more about how you felt in that moment?
Which moment is this?
The moment with your beloved.
Well, I was sad. I was disappointed. I think I said that in my account. And I've seen her a couple times. She's still around in Sebastopol with a new guy. And, just have to let go. That's not the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I just can't get my needs met with everyone through closeness and intimacy. So yeah, it's more difficult for me, I think. And the woman that I am involved with right now, who is quite sick, is quite well, and I think we have very similar anger stuff from early on. I learned that my pre-verbal rage did not happen as a child. This was a prior lifetime.
Yes.
And the woman who was my mother in this life was a spouse, my wife in that life. To really put this, to go ballistic, multidimensional with this. So I'm trying to put all that together. It's certainly not just a 3D feel close to another physical, form here in this time and space.
Those moments that we meet someone that we've known for many eternities, that just bring up all of our stuff, our most deeply intimate wounding.
Yeah, so I didn't get to the normal psychosexual development as a result in my adolescenthood. My mom was very protective, and it wasn't until I was in my 20s and 30s that I kind of floated into those relationships. And now I don't have the strong urge and desire that I did, and so that's where that is.
That is a really tough place to be in. It really is there. Like to not feel safe to explore your sexuality. That's one of the, I meet a lot of people like that in my practice as a sex coach, right? So.
I have explored it. I've had dozens. It's been a long time, but I've had many, many relationships that I haven't stuck around. I'm kind of on the road, and they haven't lasted that long in many cases.
What is it that you're craving? in this moment. Or desiring in this moment. To be seen or held in.
Well, my angels who've been reading me and communicating every day, white magi, like they're trying to be, have said that I need a monogamous relationship and to just do my double Capricorn, more traditional things in way of serving. And I think that's right.
Thank you.
To give up on my ideals of polyamory, which I held in my own early days as a then Marriage, Family, and Child Clinical Services. It was MFCC in the beginning before it became MFT, this training that Scott and I and some others have.
You know, those who take the path of polyamory are really in to look at all of their stuff and all of their like security and safety stuff inside.
Yeah, I know. I've watched people go through it, and I remember the O'Neill's book on open marriage. That didn't last either. That couple.
It really gives you an opportunity to look at your beliefs around relationship safety and what love is. And it can be completely rocking to the whole system. Thank you for being so honest and vulnerable.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, George. We love you. And again, you are always right here, and I appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability. It's a gift for all of us. Thank you. You know, it's not easy to come on with us and share. So thank you so much. I was just checking Facebook and I see Stephen's coming in. So go ahead, Stephen, and then I'll share another question from Facebook.
Yeah, one thing about George's written comment that really touched me was him positioning hearing as this emotional feeling level experience and phenomena that we have. And I think like a lot of us have this idea that hearing is this thing that happens where something goes in the ear organ and it's intellectualized through the brain. But when it actually comes to really hearing someone, it's actually about feeling someone. Like feeling heard has so much to do with feeling felt. You know, if I'm sharing something with someone or someone sharing something with me, and I'm kind of like up in my head and not really able to connect with what their experience is, and I'm kind of in my own world and reality about it. There's like a tangible kind of corrosion in the field. Whereas if I'm able to hear them and really be with what they're sharing and feel it alongside with them, there's just this magical co-regulating connective experience that happens. So that's kind of how I synthesized at least that part of George's written post.
Thank you for that.
So what happened for me was that during my Hathor training, I had a giant opening, and I am able to receive psychic impressions of others' personalities just from feeling the vibration of their voice. I think many of us do that as we become more advanced. And it was through doing my Qigong practice, cultivating, bringing that energy into me. And I suppose some people can do similar with a tantric yoga, tantric loving practice with a partner. You know, some of the women tell me they can have. For me, it's always been a depletion of my energy and I wouldn't say it's been unfulfilling, but I have to be careful with some of the Scorpio manipulator in particular really drained me. You know, she knew the sex magic and she was sucking my vital force, you know, so that happened to me as well.
I'm gonna kind of move this conversation forward, but you know, thank you again. But I don't want to get kind of into specific, especially about someone who's not here, because we want to respect privacy. But there is a great question that came in, again on Facebook, how to manage different sexual preferences with my lover. Who wants to tackle that one? Trish, you've got a great look on your face. No?
I want other people to speak. Like there are love and coaches here all over. Like y'all.
Absolutely. Stephen,
Yeah.
Sabrina, Hazel.
I'm happy to go again. I feel like I've been talking a lot as well, but yeah.
Can you read it again?
Yeah. How do I manage? Let me make sure I got it right. How do I manage different sexual preferences with my lover?
Okay. I notice I want to like double click and find out what that means, manage. Like, I don't know if that means like meet them or explore them or what, because when I hear the question, I'm like, ooh, different preferences. I notice I get excited. And I get excited because in the world of the erotic blueprint, if you know that world, which Jaya created, there's different erotic blueprints, and one of them is called shapeshifter, and the shapeshifter is the one that will kind of like go and be chameleon and likes all the other options, and the other ones are sexuality, sensuality, kinky, and sensual. So there's 5 different types. So one of the things that I do with my clients when they're exploring what turns someone on and what turns someone off is having a list of like, what are the things that you are like listing all the possibilities. And there's you can Google lists. I don't have one on top of mine, but just like having a list of all the different possibilities that you could do sensually, sexually, or kinkily, and going through that list and just saying like, what are you a yes to? What are you a no to? What are you open to exploring? What are you willing to give, or what are you willing to receive? So for example, I really like to bite, but I don't always love to be bitten. So if it's like biting was something that was fun for you, then you could decide, I'm available to offer it, but I'm not willing to receive it. So that's one way. It's like an inventory. It's kind of like a quiz exploring, what is your partner into? And then also just being able to say, there could be a time where you're like, I get that you're into that and I'm not willing to meet you in that place. And that's okay. And that, like supporting people's sovereignty and preferences. So yeah, doing a little bit of inventory and finding out what turns both of you on and finding the matches on that list.
Beautiful. Thank you. Sabrina, we haven't heard from you as much. Would you like to share anything about different sexual preferences?
Yeah, I found it very helpful to discuss this early on in a relationship, like super early on, so that this is information to decide if you actually want to cultivate and pursue this person as a match. It's similar to like every other sort of aspect in a relationship, like financial, children, every other thing, like sexual preferences is part of the pie. So knowing if you've already entered a relationship and everything else matches except this, then there's a negotiation process involved. And there's also kind of a spirit needed of being open-minded and being open to trying new things, and finding a middle ground and compromise. If we go in being like, for 20 years, I've done this. This is what I like for 20 years. There's no negotiation. There's no softness. There's no opening to somebody else's reality or preferences. But I'd love to hear from Stephen on this because he has a lot of opinions on this.
Yeah, the first layer that's present is like, I really just love advocating for a culture of teammateship and collaboration, just as like a baked in context in the relationship. Like I love knowing that I can go to my partner and I'll be met with a spirit of lean in, like open-hearted, curious exploration, and yeah, like having a felt sense that this person's my teammate, and when there's like a conflict or a difference about something, a sexual preference even, that there's a conversation that's available rather than it kind of being like shut off or pushed away. The next layer that's present for me too is like, I think this conversation gets tricky when there's a sexual preference where the other person's just like an absolute hard no for, like, we are not going there. I'm not available for that. And because what happens there is it eliminates further possibility. And I'm not saying that there should be further possibility if and someone should go beyond their boundary, but what I love including a degree of compassion when a partner asks something from us and it's actually not a no for us to say yes to. It's a no for us. Like, it's not something we're willing to engage. And if it's a long-term relationship, like, the connotations of that is like, I might never get this again. You know, it's like this is something that I'm really longing for. And if I'm going to be in a long-term relationship with this person, I'm going to need to face the reality that I might never ever get this again. And there's like a grief and a sense of loss, potentially. And yeah, maybe like some disappointment and sadness in the space too. And so, like, if my partner asks something from me and I'm just like a hard no for it, they might have a grief process that they go through with that no. And instead of having my no, like taking that off the table, be a source of like disconnection and grief and mourning in a way that keeps us distant from each other, I can actually co-grieve with them and lean in and go into emotional validation for their experience. You know, it's like, you just asked me for something that's really important to you, and I just said no. And like, that's like, for sure, it's a recipe for disappointment, grief, and sadness. And like, I just want you to know that, like, I'm feeling your grief and sadness along with you. And I want to validate that you wanted this thing from me and I've said no to it. And like, the connotations of that are, you might not be able to get that. And I just want to acknowledge that there might be a sense of grief, sadness, and loss present for you right now. So instead of it like us, like a no creating enemies of each other, it's an actual opportunity for a deeper closeness and emotional intimacy.
Mhm. Thank you. That was beautiful. Beautifully stated. All right, we have another question. And this is, where does self-love become selfish? And it was a long thing, but my kind of concising it was that this person apparently has a partner who is constantly saying, I need this, I need that, and I need this, I need that. And that's self-love. And it's all about, I need to learn to love myself. But he finds that oftentimes it's selfish because she's ignoring him and the children and other needs. There's a long message. So I apologize to you. You know who I'm talking to. So I guess just differentiations around what is self-love versus selfish behavior. You know, how do we balance care for self with care for other members of the family? Stephen, is your hand up from before or for this one? For this one. Okay.
Yeah, a question that I like to ask is what is it in service to? So if someone is really advocating for what they need and what they're desiring, like, that's the deeper question, is like, what's it in service to? If it's in service to, I need to do things A, B, C, and D so that I can recharge my own battery and fill my own cup so that I have more to give back to my beloved, my children, my work, my profession, my family, all of the things that are asking for something from me. Like, to me, that's self-love. But when it becomes more of like a dominating kind of control centric, like, I need to get what I want, to me, that kind of like sort of starts to dabble into the territory of high narcissistic traits, when it's like just in service to the self. And like, that's the orientation, is just constant in service to the self, without that piece of filling up, recharging my own battery and filling up my own cup so that I actually have more to give. And so, without actually knowing your situation, that's I think an important delineation, is what's the behavior in service to ultimately.
That's a beautiful differentiation. Thank you. Here's a Grace. Do you have anything that comes to mind for you on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, what I do is just start getting really curious, and asking them, what does self-love mean to them? And I also get curious at the intersection of how can your self-love practices and my self-love practices actually support both of us? Because if the self-love practices that they're doing are like, I mean, I feel like I'm going to be echoing a lot of what Stephen was saying, but yeah, is it adding to the ecosystem? I like to imagine like the whatever family unit, relational unit that there is, it's like when someone's caring for themselves, is it adding value? Are they being able to come back fully charged and contributing to the ecosystem? And then again, boundaries, I'm going to say boundaries again. Being able to know what is okay and what's not for you in a relationship. And like, if someone's showing up in a way consistently where that you're not feeling met, and there's not room for you also to be able to take care of your own self and do some self-love practices, then there's a conversation that needs to happen, because it sounds like there's a possibility that you're not feeling the support, or you're not feeling, getting what you're needing in the relationship as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Sabrina, do you have anything you want to add to this?
No, I think everyone spoke really beautifully, and it feels complete to me.
Okay, great. I'll talk about something. We've talked about boundaries a few times. And one of the things that Trish and I teach in Love Coach Academy is how to make a boundary sandwich. So whenever we're setting a boundary or saying no, always lead with authentic reassurance that you care. In whatever way that's authentic. I care about you. I care about our relationship. It might even be, I care about your request. But lead with authentic reassurance that you care, and then set the boundary. And then after you set the boundary, then you create the space to listen to how they respond. You give them the gift of your presence, because if you're setting a boundary or you're saying no, they're probably going to be disappointed. They might even be angry. And rather than defending ourselves or changing our choice, we acknowledge the disappointment. Think of all the men that have asked Trish out and she said no, and their disappointment. And Trish is beautiful, I'm sure, at being in the presence of that moment. Seriously, we all have to say no, and we all have to set boundaries, but remember the boundary sandwich: reassurance that you care, set the boundary, and then be present to their disappointment, their anger, their frustration, without taking it on, without changing your space. So I wanted to offer that little thought. All right. Are there any other questions in the Zoom room? I think what we're going to do is I'm going to turn over to Stephen to tell us all about RelationFlix, because this is the place to go for any and all of your relationship needs. It's amazing what this man has created. And he has a team, but he's pretty much the guy who's been the guiding force. I can remember, Stephen, you first telling Trish and I about this years ago, when it was just an idea that you wanted to do. It's like, what do you guys think of a website that was like the relationship Netflix? And you did it, man. You created it. So share it with our audience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott. RelationFlix is an absolute treasure trove of video education on relationships, sexuality, communication skills, conflict resolution, attachment theory, trauma healing, spirituality, tantra, just a myriad of subjects. And really a special shout out to both Scott and Trish here for your incredible content. Trish, I love and adore your content. You bring your signature charm and charisma and sass and energy and enthusiasm, and it's just such a joy to watch your content, and it's really high value and potent too. So I'm loving your content, and also loving Scott's course, Relationship Essentials, which is just an absolute masterclass in compassionate communication, NVC, emotional intelligence. Just an absolutely dynamite course that I've taken 4 or 5 times from Scott directly, and it's just a treat and a privilege to have it on the platform. I'll just give you a little bit of a tour here. I'm gonna be 7-year-old Stephen in elementary school who's at show and tell on a school day here, and show you the platform. So when you sign in for an account, this is what you'll see. Our homepage is full of all these video carousels. Of course, we have our newest videos right at the top. Our most popular videos are Exploring Women's Pleasure by Ariel Brown, Increasing Your Sexual Confidence, The Art of Sensual Massage. There's just a plethora of practices for couples to explore together. It's really beautiful and great. You can see in the couples practices reel here. We also have our videos broken down by different categories, which you can see in the drop-down menu as you engage. And we just implemented a new feature, which is a live broadcasting feature. So once every 2 weeks, we broadcast a really incredible live webinar. We just had Sabrina on for the Undefended Heart, which was just a beautiful class in managing our tendency to be defensive in conflict. We have trauma-informed relationships with Mike Thomas, who's a nervous system regulation expert. The one after that, I believe it's July 26th, Wednesday, is queer sacred sexuality, which I'm very excited to have a local guy from the coast here facilitating. So our live broadcasting repertoire is building out. So that's RelationFlix. And we also have a podcast, and we're just about to launch our blog and a whole bunch of other relationship focused offerings. So that's who we are and what we're up to. And there's a great, we're just about to change our monetization away from a subscription service, because I know a lot of us have subscription fatigue. And so we're going to be offering RelationFlix for a low one-time price point. So stay tuned for news on that.
Oh,
Thank you, Scott.
When that happens, let us know so that we can update our audience.
Will do.
Omashar has a question. When you have been in a relationship for a while and have unconsciously put up with the other's self-serving behavior, and you then wake up to the fact that there's a way to turn things around, how can you broach the subject with your perhaps closed-hearted partner? Good question. I'm going to bring up our experts. Who wants to tackle that? Stephen.
Yeah, first of all, if this is a real life situation, Omashar, I mean, actually, irrespective if it's real or hypothetical, it's a very, very difficult situation. And if it is in fact a real situation that you're looking at facing or going through, then yeah, I just want to empathize with how hard that is, to wake up to the acknowledgement that the relationship's been really one-sided, and that partner might not be open to even having a conversation about it. And just like the sense of kind of feeling stuck or trapped is really real in a situation like that. And I think this is a situation that requires a very delicate approach, and because it's chances of it going well if all of a sudden we kind of come out of nowhere and kind of take a wrecking ball to what's already been established in the culture of the relationship, and there's a big request for like a complete paradigm change. Sometimes that can be received as an attack or a make wrong, like, oh, I'm doing something wrong, or like they're being blamed for it. And so for me, if I'm in this situation, the one thing I want to establish above all else is that there's a culture of teammateship and collaboration. And so that would be the first thing that would be in service to, would be to invite a conversation that establishes that. It's like really, really create an atmosphere where if there is something in the relationship that doesn't feel great that's happening, that there's room to talk about it, rather than kind of being enemies with each other about it. There's kind of a quality of, instead of facing each other, squaring off against each other, there's two people looking at the challenge in teammateship together, and it's looked at as a problem that we get to solve together. So once that's been established, I would invite their perspective to the table first with curiosity and say, do you feel like our relationship has been fair or highly mutual, or there's a high degree of reciprocity? And just collect information about what their world and experience is like, because it's possible that they might come back to like, I cook, I clean, I do the dishes, I do this, I do that, and all these other things. And there might be ways that they see that they're contributing that might be like out of alignment with, like, say, our love language, the ways that we really feel loved and cared for and considered. But they might be showing up in all these other ways where in their reality, they are in mutuality and reciprocity. So we want to make room to include that first. And maybe they do say, I wasn't really paying attention to that, or I don't really know, they might have like an ambiguous answer. And then that's a great moment for us to bring our own perspective to the table, with consent, being like, I see things a little bit differently than you do, and I'd love for some room to share about that. And once there's like an atmosphere of consent for that to be revealed, then we go, I've been actually feeling a bit fatigued. And again, like speaking about our own experience going vulnerable, like I've been feeling fatigued. I've been feeling desire for more touch or more care or more things A, B, C, and D. How does that meet you where you're at? Like, I love that question. It's like, how does that meet you where you're at? And then you can have like a collaborative dialogue rather than kind of a tennis match of finger pointing.
Thank you so much, Stephen. That was really, really complete, really powerful. Hazel Grace has their hand up.
Yeah, thank you. That was really great, Stephen. And you mentioned owning our experience. And when I hear your question, Omashar, the first thing that I think of how I would approach or broach the subject is looking within and taking responsibility with how I've shown up and what have I done. And so what I'm hearing you say is unconsciously put up with. So that's the place to like own and take responsibility. Like, I've been putting up with this. And so approaching the subject is first saying, like, I want to take responsibility for what I have or have not done to contribute this pattern that we have in our relationship. And so that's how I would start the frame the conversation, and then say how you want the conversation to go. So what would be the result? What would be the end? What would be the thing of like, I want to have this conversation so that, or in service of us feeling more sense of harmony, or, me feeling more generosity and reciprocity. What do you want to have happen at the end of the conversation? And then there's an acronym, clearing the air, AIR. If you wanted to have the conversation, so acknowledge what happened. So I would choose something that's like smaller and like low stakes and maybe less intensity to start with, and name a thing that happens. So like, when you don't take out the trash, or yesterday when you didn't take out the trash and that was the day for you to take your trash out. So getting really specific about a thing objectively that you can both agree on, name the impact. So that's impact, of like, I feel let down, or I feel really alone, or I feel really exhausted, or whatever it is. And then the R stands for, the R stands for a lot of different things, but one of them is making requests. So you can make a request of what is it that you want, that you didn't get. Or you could even ask for some version of them asking them to acknowledge if they haven't done the thing that they said they were going to do. You can make requests like, have them take responsibility and apologize, or express some sort of remorse. That's one of the other R's. And is there something that you can think of that would help you to feel them actually contributing more, and being really clear about what that would look like and what that would mean. And the more specific, the better. So I would start with taking responsibility. How have you played a part in this pattern that you've both co-created? And then choosing something to talk about really specifically and letting them know what's the impact of when they do or don't do those things, and then make requests. And maybe you can also create agreements of things that would work for you.
Beautiful. That was very clear. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think while we've got you, I noticed something really beautiful. And that was in what you said. You talk about healing communication gaps and transforming that into capacity for intimacy. And we've talked a lot about that today, but it's such it's the alchemy, right, of going from conflict into greater connection. Do you have any kind of tip, tool, or practice in addition to what you just shared for that?
Yeah, one of the tools that I really love is I called it the charge scale. So if you're feeling some sort of tension or conflict or hurt or upset, imagine how intense that feels on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being like it feels almost unmentionable, and a 10 would be like this is a foundational break of trust in our relationship. So what I like to do is if I have a conflict with my partner and I want to talk about it, I might say something like, hey, I've got something at the level 3 on the charge scale. Are you available to hear it? So that is informed consent. Are you available to have a conflict resolution conversation? This is how intense it is. So that's what the charge scale is, and that's how I invite people to use it. And what I really, really encourage is that you have the conversations of the 1s and the 2s and the 3s. You do those frequently, and you clear those out so that those 2s and 3s don't become 6, 7, 8, 9s and become more intense. Because I think what happens is sometimes people will avoid it. They're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it. But then it builds and builds and becomes resentful. And so people think it also might be more efficient to avoid those things, but ultimately it's not efficient because the emotional labor and or the time and or the resources it's going to take to clear a rupture or a conflict that's more intense than it would be to 2. So so efficiency, using the charge scale, and clear the lower ones so that it doesn't build into resentment and big ruptures.
Beautiful. Well, Dr. Hazel Grace can be found on her website, and it is a wonderful website. Definitely, I think some of our friends might be ready for an intimacy makeover. So that's where people can put their name and their email address. I'm going to do that right now because I always like to track what our friends are doing. So it's drhazelgrace.com. And is there anything that you want us, as I fill this out, is there anything you want for our audience to know about your website or about your offerings? I love that photo.
Thank you. Yeah, there's events and retreats up top.
Yep.
And next week you'll see I'm doing the one in the middle, Intimacy Through the Art of Repair. It's on July 12th. That's a virtual event. So that's one of the ones coming up if you're want to geek out more on conflict resolution in relationships.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for being on the show. It's so great running into you again.
Yeah.
And again, congratulations on being in a really healthy, awesome relationship.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Yeah. Sabrina, we have not heard from you for a little bit. This is when we're kind of concluding and wrapping up. So before we go to your website, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience? Any kind of final thoughts?
Yeah, just about the last question from Omashar, that beautiful question. I also feel like the answers were very complete, but there was one piece about the other person having unconscious patterns, or us. Sorry, let me just find the exact wording because I just thought it was very beautifully worded. Unconsciously put up with others' self-serving behavior. So that's us being unconscious. And I just wanted to mention what I said before about holding our partners in positive self-regard. So perhaps they've been unconscious themselves, and we have also been unconscious. And I just want to mention that with an open heart, they could potentially just realize, like, hey, I didn't realize that I was being unconscious here. I'm saying this because I've been that person where somebody's brought something to me, and I've realized, been totally blind to the fact that I had problematic behavior. I was unconscious to it. And when it was brought to me in a gentle way, similar to how Hazel, Grace, and Stephen mentioned, the graceful way of bringing that up, it was a huge blossoming within the relationship and a huge opening and an opportunity. So having that, that approach of maybe we've both been unconscious, I've raised my consciousness, and I see the potential reality where you can also have an elevated consciousness here as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's a lovely thought. And I'm just so grateful to get to know you a little bit, because as you can probably tell by now, we love Stephen a lot. And so it's good to see his new love and bring him on as I'm acknowledging you both. Just want to really wish both of you blessing, and what a blessing it is for you, Sabrina, to have somebody as wise as Stephen, and how wonderful it is for you, Stephen, to be somebody who's learning from you, matching you. And I look forward to just watching how the two of you co-create personally and professionally together. It's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Sabrina.
Yeah, I'm learning from her too.
Sabrina can be reached at our website, which is her name, sabrinasundari.com. Sabrina, SUNDARI.com. Clinical hypnotherapy, rapid resolution therapy, trauma-sensitive certified coach. And I see here that you offer a free consultation call. Tell us a little bit.
For 20 minutes, if you want to talk about anything you're moving through, it's no obligation. I'm just here as a service to be a listening ear and offer any guidance that I can. So you're welcome to book with me whenever you'd like. And if you'd like to go further, I offer a 6-week one-on-one personalized kind of a program where we work with the subconscious as my clinical hypnotherapy background. So the patterns that you've developed that you may not be conscious of, we can correct them and remap your subconscious mind towards healthy relationships.
Beautiful, thank you. And that's a really lovely offer. And I'm hoping that some of the people watching are going to, yeah, I want to work with Sabrina, or I'm going to buy RelationFlix, or I definitely want to work with Dr. Hazel Grace. So thank you for that. We are going to wrap up a little bit. And, you know, Mary, I'll respond. Mary is saying, why are we wrapping up so soon? Don't we have more time? Well, you know, this show actually used to be a 90-minute show, but sometimes we go 2 hours. If you want length, come on Saturday nights, because our Saturday night show always is at least 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. And there have even times we've gone 4 hours. But you know, actually, it's scheduled to be a 90-minute show. But I love that you don't want to leave. There is one last question, though, I will address, even though we kind of did our conclusions. And this is from dear Dia Therese, who we love. She writes, will you guide me to a specific resource who addresses parental, in my case, father, sexual misconduct with me when I was a very small child, perhaps a toddler? I'm going to bring all of you up while I read this. I'm guessing that there probably might be more than one response. I have no memory of the incidents. However, following an incident that I fully remember at age 30, and my father referred to when you were a baby, I see it has colored all my relationships, sexual and non, male and female. I'm at a threshold demanding that I address this in order to be the partner I'm ready to draw in. Underlying rage is causing so much severe head pain. Thank you and love to you. And Dia Therese acknowledges that she is 77. So thank you, Dia Therese. That's a very vulnerable share. And who would like to respond?
Yeah.
Dr.
Hazel and then Stephen.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, Dia Therese, I just want to share some my care and my compassion for what you went through, and also celebrating you and being so excited that you are at this age, like really being like, and I want more. And so I'm just really acknowledging you and expressing some care of what you went through. You know, the work that I do is very somatic based, and what that means is really listening and paying attention to the body. As the body, as I view it, the body keeps the wisdom, the body holds on to memories. And so what I want to say is that you don't actually have to have all of the memories in order to do clearing. And I imagine some of the work that Sabrina does would actually be really powerful at this as well. But I just wanted to come on and say thanks for sharing and celebrating you and acknowledging your courage for doing something about it and asking for support.
Beautiful, thank you. Stephen.
Yeah. First things first, I just want to acknowledge how tragic and unfortunate of a situation that is. You know, it's like when we're under the care of our parents, we're so vulnerable to them, and that includes the level of integrity that they hold us with. And so there's like a grief and a sadness present for me that there was a dynamic that's created a harm in your world from a place that ideally should have been a safe haven for you. And so just, yeah, I feel a lot of compassion and empathy for that dynamic. And also how it's impacting present moment relationships and yeah, I think what I'm feeling called to resurface is that there's like these responses. Like I collected that there's this underlying rage, and that's valid. It's valid, and I think that there can be a part of us that makes our reactions and responses bad or wrong because they're displeasing to other people, and they're displeasing to us too because they're really uncomfortable. But to me, that sounds like a very natural response to mistreatment from a primary source of connection that our parent is. And we orientate to our adult relationships, our significant adult relationships, in a very similar way. They're a primary source of connection. And so when there's been an unsafe dynamic in a primary source of connection in the past, like our body's going to be looking out for us in as it shows up later down the road too. And so to me, this is like a difficult yet very natural response. So I'm hoping that there's something available to you that can be self-validating about that. And yeah, really celebrating and encouraging that you're willing and to meaningfully look at this. And beyond that, I can't recommend a qualified therapist enough who actually specializes in sexual trauma. That's 100% where I would point your compass to, is someone with a PhD who specializes in precisely this. So that's what I have for you right now.
I'd like to come in on this a little bit, and I'm going to open it up beyond Therese, but anyone who's watching who has had what I call an unnatural childhood. In a natural childhood, the father provides safety and the mother provides nurturing. But very often, people have had a father that wasn't safe. They was the opposite of safe. And sometimes people have had a mother that was neglectful or abusive or not even present. And when we've had an unnatural childhood, often tragically, the child, as they grow into an adult, believes there's something fundamentally wrong with me because I didn't get what I should have gotten. And it almost always becomes a lot of shame can come in, a lot of, as we heard earlier, a lot of rage, a lot of anger, a lot of discomfort. And definitely, as Stephen said, yes, find the psychiatrist or someone really trained in this field. And there are relationship coaches, love coaches that do work in this field that I think are very good. But I also want to just talk about the value of having a spiritual practice. Because what I've observed, having coached over 1,000 couples and families and a few thousand individuals, people that have a strong spiritual practice that helps them to connect to that which is greater than themselves are much more capable of managing both short-term discomfort and difficult circumstances and long-term, lifelong challenges. And a spiritual practice can be yoga, playing a musical instrument, doing a martial art form, meditation. It doesn't have to be a religion. It can be. If you have a good religion and faith in a good religion, that's awesome. But it doesn't have to be religious. But there are many forms of spiritual practice. And as we age, and recognizing Dia is 77, I'm 67, as we age, cultivating an authentic connection to that which has an infinite number of names. And so I don't want to use a name that could trigger somebody, but call it God or higher self or the life or the universe or whatever you want to call it. Having a direct connection to something higher that transcends the tragedy of what happened in our unnatural childhood, that transcends the tragedy of parents that were not good parents, that didn't have the right capability to parent you properly. We then look to the greater parent, Mother Earth, Father Sky, life, whatever you want to call it. And so I just encourage finding that both things, find the right therapist and either do more of your spiritual practice if you already have one, or cultivate a spiritual practice. And that's for anybody who can relate to having an unnatural childhood. Trish, as we conclude, just wondering if you have any final thoughts on tonight's topic or anything you'd like to share before we say goodnight.
Just want to really appreciate everyone for being so vulnerable and honest and showing up in allowing us to cultivate intimacy together on this call and to make sweeter friendships and to really support each other's work in our hearts. So thank you so much for your time this evening.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll bring everybody up and then we'll talk about what we're going to do on Saturday night. But here are our wonderful people. And we also, of course, are going to have an Om Shar song to conclude. But thank you, everybody, so much for your wisdom. Really appreciate it. And want to let our audience know, Mary, I know you want more time. We'll give you more time on Saturday night because we're going to be celebrating and previewing Bhakti Fest 2023. And we're going to have some wonderful people with us. Ayla Nerio, who's an amazing musical artist. Pato Banton will be back. We love Pato. Sridhar, who is actually at Woodstock, has been in this world for a long time, is my co-host, and he is who created Bhakti Fest. And we're also going to hear from several other people that are yoga teachers and musical artists from Bhakti Fest. And so that's going to be our show on Saturday night, and it's going to be really, really fun. And of course, we always are encouraging people to attend Bhakti Fest. It's going to take place in September in Joshua Tree. And then on Sunday, you don't want to miss the Sunday show. We've got two people, Mia O'Brien and Deborah Juliet, both of whom are very closely involved with the Twin Ray community. I'm there right now. I'm in Ashland. And we've got some pretty exciting announcements because we're going to be adding some features to the Awakening World. We're going to be doing more collaboration with the Twin Ray community, and we will tell you all about that on Sunday morning. And you'll also learn from these two women who are both very high vibe beings, how some of the things we're going to be adding to the Global Peace Drive and the Awakening World have impacted their lives. So that's Sunday's show. All right, all things usually begin and end with Om Shar. And love the background, love you, brother.
Love you so much. What a deep, wonderful topic. It's not a show, it's an expose of our heart and how much of a family we have here. So thank you all for enlivening my day and my night. And this is a song called Precious One.
Precious one, I love you more than I can say. You are the one that's here in my life all the time, shining your light through my day. Only you can take all of my troubles and cares. With your breath you blow them away like the wind, of that bright and glorious day, when your love shines right through the heart of our world, melting and stands in the way. Precious one, I love you more than I can say. You are the one that's here in my life all the time, shining your light through my day.
Beautiful. I'm going to go to full gallery view for at least those of you who will hide the non-video people. Thank you.
Right.
Have your cameras on. Thank you, Omashar, Eleanor, and Ian. Thank you for leading the dancing. And really, what a lovely show. A very lovely show. I sure do hope to see all of you on this weekend. And again, thanks to our presenters, and God's blessings. Have a beautiful few days, everybody. Good night.